Hey, Zach, how's it going? Hey, Wes.
Not too bad, assuming you can hear us now.
Okay. I think I just heard you briefly there.
Yeah, you able to hear now?
Yep, cool.
All
Sounds
right,
good.
And so I have a question real quick about
Yeah.
the HTML searches. I cannot for the life of me find a website that actually uses the paragraph graph tab.
What?
Like they're all using like, I don't know if I'm looking at it wrong, but like everything just uses scripting in order to do it. Nothing actually uses the paragraph tag.
All right, let's see what we can't find here.
I may not go to enough indie websites or something, but
All right, I'm going to check out. Well, let's start off with our beloved COCC. All right, so I'm going to go here first, and I don't know if they've got it, but we'll find out soon enough. And obviously, you're going to have better chances on pages that seem to have some text. Oh, they got a little bit of text on there. So I'm going to do a Control U. I'll zoom in a little bit here. And I'm going to do Control F to find, makes it a little bit easier. And I'm going to search for hashtag P. So here we go. So there's an example of a paragraph tag.
okay, so it is in there.
Yeah, they got them on there. Now, don't forget that Control F to find. That could be the make it or break it feature that you're hoping for. Okay, and there's a paragraph with that's an empty paragraph there. Yeah, so they got a lot of paragraphs there. Let's try another site. What's a site you go to a lot?
I mean Reddit. I'm in Reddit all the time. In fact,
Okay.
it's open right now.
You know, I've got an account for Reddit, but I have not logged in a bit. I don't even know if I have that on my password manager. I'm going to block that. Let me hit log in. I wonder if it's... Oh, man. Baby cheetahs fighting puppies. Okay, so let's see. I'm at Reddit now. Yeah, right. This one could be tougher, but let's see what happens. I'm going to do a Control U, view the source code. It's thinking.
I wonder. So doing the Control U that you're doing, is it different than like say inspect element through Google?
It's a little bit different, but very, very
That
darn
might
close.
be what it is because Google was just showing me all the scripting tags and nothing within them, and I'm seeing that this is showing you the scripting tags with everything inside.
Yeah. So now that's not a P tag there. Yeah, these are all. Oh, that's polygon, path. Okay, well, Reddit actually may not be using much in the way of P tags.
All right, I'll use the Control U and see if because I've got quite a few of them, but I think there's like 3 that I'm missing, and that might be what helps me get the rest.
Yeah. Give that a try. Control U is basically just view the source code of the page that you're at, and that's kind of the fast, easy way to get an overview. I'm a big fan of the inspector, though. So, for instance, if I'm over at Reddit, by the way, I'm using a new browser today. I'm using Opera GX that a couple of your classmates have suggested. So I installed Opera GX and I made it my default browser to kind of force me to use it. And I've done a little bit of a setup with it, but let's see, Control Shift I, and great, that brings up an inspector, and I'll click on this. And so there's a little inspector tool in most browsers, same thing, it's Control Shift I, and then you can click on this little tiny little button. I know it's tough to see that. And then I can hover over elements and it'll let me kind of know what's going on there. And so if I hover over this, Cheetah Cub meeting its emotional support puppy, if I just hover over that, I can tell, well, that's a headline 3. It's an H3 tag. They're using a class attribute. Don't worry about that today. And I can tell that it's an 18 pixel font. I can even see what the accessibility contrast is. And it's got good contrast, meaning it's a nice dark text on a white background. So it's good for readability. And I can even tell the color of it is hashtag 222222, which is a very dark gray, almost black. So you can hover over these elements to find it. Now, if I were to click on this, then over in my side panel, it actually will show me the HTML where it's at, so I can see it in context. And I can also see some of the styling it's using. Let's come back in a couple weeks and look at the inspector a little bit more, because as we get a little bit more HTML experience and a little bit more CSS experience, I think when we use the inspector, it's going to make a lot more sense to us. But for now, for that participation activity, just go to the page in question. One of your classmates is into the Star Wars website, but I can't remember. It's probably just this, starwars.com. But when you just go to one of those websites, Control U, which will view the source code of that entire page, and kind of browse through it that way, and you'll see a bunch of different examples. Let's just do a real quick check, Control F, and I'm going to see if I can't find a paragraph. And yeah, they do have some paragraphs over at the Star Wars website too, quite a few of them actually. Cool, that's a neat looking website. I'm going to keep that up for a moment. Okay, well, let's get to it. So yeah, so this is weird. We're doing our class completely remote. It looks like Wes made it in to the virtual class. So that's good. And yeah, we've got a few students in here. So let's get to it. Now I've got VS Code. I'm on my office computer over in Pioneer Hall. So let me go ahead and start up VS Code. And that's opened up over there. So let's bring it up over here. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my folder. So when you won't have to do this at home if you're doing it regularly, but on this computer here, I'm going to go to File and Open Folder, which is different than Open File. I'm going to open a folder, and I'm going to look for my COCC docs, my demos. I'm going to go to my working folder, which is right here. I'm going to select that folder. And what's nice about doing that is I'm going to get a folder display off to the side. Now I can hide, or I can hide. Come on, you can do it. No, it's not letting me hide yet. I don't know why it's not letting me hide. Oh, I think things are frozen up here for a moment. There we go. So now I can click this little folder button. I can show my entire working folder, which includes my subfolders in there for images and styles. It includes all of the web pages I've been making so far. And I can even go into my images folder and I can see all the images that I have in there and stuff like that. So that's going to come in handy. Now I'm going to go ahead and start a brand new web page. And before class started, I went into VS Code and I changed my font. So in VS Code, I can do Control comma in order to get to my settings. And I changed the font on my editor to something really big. I did a 32-point font. And that allows me, and then I can close the settings or just go back here. That allows me to have a nice big font on the page where it doesn't zoom in on some of the other elements. So hopefully that'll make it nice and easy to read. And it looks like I am recording, so I've got the recorder turned on and all that fun stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and get into my page here. I'm going to start off with a doc type definition. And before I get too far in this, I'm going to do File, Save As. And I'm going to call this week 2 underscore. And I'm going to call it text and hyperlinks. Save. Okay, get a little title in there. Let's do one. All right, feeling pretty good about that. So I've got my author, got my viewport in there. Description. Okay, so far everything's looking pretty good. I left out something already pretty important here. I do have my chat window off to the side, and I'm just kind of plugging along, typing away, but I left out something. Oh, there you go, Marcus. Thanks for that. I completely forgot my head tags. So I'm going to do an opening and closing head tag. Okay, cool. So that is commitment there. So your classmate Zach, I guess, is attending class in his car. I don't know if that's safe. All right, so there's the head section, and then after that, I'll put the body section in there. Looks good. Okay, he's on a bus. Good. Actually, I did test that once, just to see where could I put my phone in my car. Not that I was going to be driving, but if I was somewhere and I needed to be part of a Zoom session, could I put my phone in some convenient spot and somewhat engage there? I'm like trying to stick it in the sun visor and lean it on the steering wheel and stuff like that. So fortunately haven't had to take care of that yet. Okay, so how's this looking? Got my doc type definition, HTML tag with language attribute, got the head section on there with meta character encoding, I've got my title, and I've got a few other meta tags. Cool. Don't forget, let's get in the habit. If you're not in the habit yet, let's make sure that we're putting in this meta viewport. Really good for making pages that are mobile friendly. In fact, I'm going to show you a couple new things today to start getting into this mobile friendly frame of mind. And then I've got the body of my page. Now, our goal today is to continue practicing our week 2 content. And so if I were to jump back over to my Opera GX browser and I head back over to our course modules, we'll see that in week 2, we're focused on headings, paragraphs, lists, and hyperlinks. I just called mine text and hyperlinks. And don't forget, there's a lot of resources in here. So don't just get by on what we're doing in class. There's a lot of beautifully colored resources and all these pastels to check out. And some of them are longer than others. So make sure you pace yourself and go through there and explore and see what's going on. And so that's in addition to what we're working on there. So let me head back over to, actually, while I'm here, I'm just going to head over to this and Control O to open. And I'm going to find my page, which is in my working folder, and it is week 2, text and hyperlinks. I'll just double click it, and there's that blank page. Great. So I'm going to keep coming back to this page to see how things are looking. All right, feeling good about that. So in addition, in the head section, I'm going to go ahead and create a place for some internal styles with an opening and closing set of style tags. So I'm feeling good about that. Now, by the way, on my code editor here, I do have autosave checked. So sometimes I may not mention that I'm pressing Control S. Sometimes I will forget to press Control S because I'm used to relying on that autosave feature. But definitely, if you're not using autosave, and it's okay if you're not, then obviously you got to press that Control S pretty frequently in order to save your page to test it out. Now I'm going to run down here to the body of my page, and I'm going to put in a header different than the head section. This is the header. This would be kind of like that top bar that's often repeated at the top of every web page within a website. And within that, I'm going to put a headline 1, and I'm going to put in text and hyperlinks. That is what I'm calling this, right? Text and hyperlinks on web pages. Perfect. Okay. On web pages. Now, you have a participation activity due on Thursday night, and several of your classmates have already started to work on this. And as I've been looking at those participation activities, I've been making a note off on a separate spreadsheet about the tags that people are finding curious or interesting or odd or unusual or something like that. And so far, there's a little bit of consistency. A couple of students have pinpointed the script tag. One student has noticed a button tag out there in the wild. And a couple of other students have noticed the span tag, the span element. I'm not going to talk about script or button today, but I do want to talk about the span tag. So I'm going to play around with it right up here, text and hyperlinks. And then in front of the word on, I'm going to put an opening span tag. And then my closing span tag is going to go after the word pages. So I'm modifying my headline 1 within my header. The text is text and hyperlinks on web pages, but some of the words on web pages is wrapped within a set of span tags. Now it looks a little bit weird because I didn't do spaces. So let me put I didn't do a space intentionally, but I'm thinking maybe it'll be easier to look at if I put a space there. And so you can see the span is only around the text, or only a portion of the text within my headline 1. And we're going to style this differently. And basically, this is what the span allows us to do. If I were just to look at my web page right now, F5 to refresh, it looks pretty darn normal. That's a normal headline 1 on my web page. And although you might be able to guess that I'm using a headline 1 because the text is bold and the text is bigger than normal, it's probably a headline. But you really can't tell that the span is doing anything. That's because the span doesn't do anything until you style it to do that. So I'm going to style the span text to be different looking than the headline 1 text. Before I style my headline 1 text, I'm going to style the header section. So I'm going to move up here to my styles, and I'm going to start to put in a couple of things. First, I'll style the body of the page. Now, one of your classmates, Hunter, he may not be with us at the moment. I think he sometimes has to catch, because of work schedules, has to catch us later. But I noticed in his, one of his pages that he made recently, he used a different way of coloring the background color of the web page. So, of course, background color is something we can put in our styles to change that background color. Now, so far, you've been seeing me do things like 585, which allows me to create that green color that I was doing on Monday. He did something a little bit different, though. Instead of putting that hex code in, he did RGB, and then in parentheses, he had a couple numbers. And I'm going to try this. I'm going to try 75, 200, 75. And that also gives me a shade of green. Now that's kind of bright. I don't know if I want to go that bright. So I think I'm going to make this 100, 200, 100. That should soften it a little bit more. There we go. It's just a little bit more muted. And if I wanted to, I could even dial this middle one back a little bit, 180. So it's a little bit darker and softer. You may not have been noticing those changes there, but I noticed them a little bit more on my screen. So I think they're doing what I want. So he was using the background color RGB method, which I really do like. And it's a different way that we can manage colors. So RGB stands for red, green, and blue. And lo and behold, we happen to have 3 values here, 3 numbers. So where the hexadecimal code that you've been seeing me use so far is a 16-base system, now we're using the decimal system. And basically the way this works is for each of the 3 colors, red, green, and blue, you can put a number in there. That number will be between 0 and 255. The closer the number is to 255, the brighter it is. The closer the number is to 0, the darker it is. So by mixing in various quantities of red, green, and blue, we can create different shades. So the biggest number I've got is in the green category. That's why my color is mostly green. Now, if I did something like 100, 100, 180, my color is going to be mostly mostly blue. It's actually kind of a lavender blue color. So if I wanted it to be more blue, then I could ease off on some of these other tones. I could ease off on the red, make that like a 50. And now it's going to look even more blue. Actually, that's quite a lovely color, I think. So I've taken out some of the red tones, and now it's a little bit of red, a little bit more green, but even a bigger splotch of blue. Red, green, and blue. I think I'm going to go with that particular system. So has anybody else tried a color other than using hex code? Maybe RGB? There's actually several ways you can do colors. Oh, so Marcus has used RGB with alpha fade, which is pretty neat too. I don't really have a good example to show you right now, but we might have to bring this up in just a moment. But basically, he's using RGBA. So you put that A in there, and then after the third number, you do comma, and then you do a fourth value. The fourth value is going to be a small number between 0 and 1, like 0.6. And basically, that makes the color somewhat transparent. Now, it is actually going to impact how this color looks. It looks very light right now because I've made it almost transparent. I believe if I put a 1 in there, it's solid. I can't remember. I always get those confused. Ah, yeah, there we go. So if I do 1, it's solid. If I do 0, it's completely transparent. And it's just going to look like white because the blue is completely transparent. So that's a pretty neat little trick. I'm going to put this as 1 now, but you'll see it very soon. I'll do something else in just a moment where that transparent color comes into play. Yeah, that's a good one. RGBA. So it's red, green, and blue alpha. Alpha transparency. Cool. I like that a lot. And I'm also going to put in a foreground color. Since I have a darkish background color, I'm going to do a foreground color that's hex code. Or if I want to stick with my pattern here, RGB, I could do something that's almost white, but not quite white. 255, 255, 255 would be pure white. So I'm going to dial that back to maybe like 230, 230, 230. And that's going to give me a very light gray, which is going to be almost white, but not quite white. I don't like using pure black and I don't like using pure white because I find the colors a little bit too high contrast. Contrast is good, but I like to soften up those colors a little bit. So I like to use colors that are close to white or close to black, and I hardly ever use like full brightness for colors just because I find them a little bit jarring. Cool. All right. I like that a lot. So we've got the body of the page set. Now let me do the font thing too. Font family Verdana. Verdana. Tahoma. Actually, let me write it this way. I think they'll give me a prompt. There we go. I like this one. So whenever you write the font family this way, basically, I'm not telling the browser that I want to use 4 different fonts. I really want to use the Verdana font. But if somebody visits my webpage and they don't have their Verdana font loaded on their computer, then it's going to use the Geneva font. And if they don't have the Geneva font loaded on their computer, it's going to use the Tahoma font. And if they don't have the Tahoma font loaded on their computer, it's going to use whatever sans serif font it can find. Which brings me to the question, the difference between a serif font and a sans serif font. Now, based on the pattern we have going here, you can probably guess that Verdana, Geneva, and Tahoma are all sans serif fonts. So the question is, if I were to open up a program like Word, pop it up over here, and I make my font nice and big so you can see it, and I went to Calibri and I said, what is this? Can you tell me, is this a sans serif font? Or is it the opposite? Is it a serif font? Is it serif or sans serif? Marcus is guessing serif. That's a terrible spelling for me. Serif or sans serif? So Marcus has been right about a lot of stuff. He brought in that cool RGBA technique. He mentioned that I forgot the head tag. Who's going to bet money that he's right about this? Okay, well, today's the day we finally get to humble. Yeah, okay, there we go. Yeah, I was going to say, today's the day we finally get to humble Marcus a little bit. But nope, he's right. Yeah, the second question there, it is a sans serif. So, yeah, so Calibri is a sans serif font. All right, so you're still, okay, what does all that mean? Well, let's try something else. I'm going to head down here and try Book Antiqua, okay? Now these are, actually this is good. They're split on two sides. I kind of like it that way. So if Calibri is a sans serif font and Book Antiqua is a serif font, can you tell how we can tell the difference? Amanda's pointing out, serif has the little tiddlies at the ends of the letters. And yes, that is the official name. They are tiddlies. So right here, and where is it easiest to tell? I think at the base of the letter R, the base of the letter I, the base of the letter F. If you look at the base of these letters, you see they have that little flare, that solid base to hold them on. That little base, that little flare tiddly is a serif. And you can see it on the lowercase q, on the uppercase f. You can see it right down there, the lowercase n. Because of those serifs, Book Antiqua is definitely a serif font. But if we look over here, sans means without, exactly. So sans is, I guess, Latin for without. So we have fonts that have the serifs, and we have fonts that are without serifs. And of course, if I look at the I and the lowercase I and the lowercase r, we don't have serifs. Now it gets a little bit confusing sometimes because if I look at the little t, it's got that little curve. The little curve is not a serif. So sometimes it gets tough to tell them apart, and maybe not every letter it stands out. But this is what a sans serif font looks like on the left, and this is what a serif font looks like on the right. And basically, on your web page, they have different kinds of values and purposes. Traditionally, for electronics, for computer screens and web pages, we would always go with a sans serif font. And if you were printing, if like printing a document, printing a book, you would go with a serif font. And that's because printer resolution actually benefited with a serif font. It was easier to read. And because computer screen resolution was not nearly as good as printer resolution, a sans serif font was easier to read. But that's been changing over the past 10 years. The quality of our resolution on computer screens is so dramatically improved that those rules are broken. So now on a web page, you can use a serif font or you can use a sans serif font, whatever you prefer. Books, for the most part, printed books, typically still go with a serif font. That could be mostly out of tradition, but it's rare that you see a book that's printed that uses a sans serif font. Find me books handy? I don't have any new books. I've got a bunch of older books. Here's a paperback. I had to hold it away so I can actually see it. And my eyes don't work so well up close. And I think it looks like, yep, it is definitely a serif font on this book, Straight Man by Richard Russo. So, and most books are probably like that. Now, the other way, as web developers, we might distinguish these is the serif fonts tend to have a more of an old-fashioned look. They're a little bit more traditional looking, whereas the sans serif fonts tend to look a little bit more contemporary, a little bit more modern. So you can use those style differences to help you determine which is a better font for your particular web page. So if I head back over to the web and I go back to the Star Wars website, Now, of course, with some of these really stylized fonts, it can be tough to categorize them, but glancing at the Star Wars logo, that looks like a sans serif font. Okay. And if I look at, here we go, Obi-Wan, oops, it just changed on me. Let's find something that sticks around a little longer. This would be a little bit tough. I see a little bit of a base on the capital I, but for the most part, I probably wouldn't even try to categorize this font, this Obi-Wan Kenobi font, as serif or sans serif. There is, there's a third category where it's just not to be determined. It can be considered a script font or a fantasy font, something like that. So it's not in the really broad categories. But let's go to where we actually see some more text. Here we go. Obi-Wan Kenobi photos and details revealed. Teaser trailer highlights. At a glance, this looks like a sans serif font. Although the lowercase t has a little curve to it, for the most part, I don't see any serifs on that font. Let's see if we have any more text. Okay, once again, I'm looking through this text down here. Sans serif. Oh, here we go. The High Republic. So Marcus is asking, are there only sans, serif, and uncategorized? For the most part. Most fonts can be put into a sans category, a sans serif, or a serif category, and then there would be some that would just kind of, we don't really know, or they tend to look a little bit more cursive, script-like, or just fantasy, wacky-like. But here's a good example of a serif font being used in conjunction with a sans serif, the High Republic. And they're using a serif font there. It gives it more of a traditional look. If I were to look at a whole bunch of fonts at once, so here's a good example, like these script fonts, it's really not worth your energy to try to categorize a cursive font like this into serif or sans serif. It's a separate thing all on its own. However, Montserrat would be sans serif. Railway, sans serif. Bodani would be serif. I'm looking at the base of the N and the lowercase I. Cursive or script, 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 serif. Playfair display is serif. Here we go. This is Game of Squid. I'd probably call this a fantasy category. It's not, it's just so dramatically stylized that although it does look like it's sans serif, I would probably not want to give this one to you in a quiz just because it's so artfully done. It's actually kind of a cool looking font, and I might have to make a mental note of this to come back and download it from my computer. Doesn't mean I can easily use it on the web page, by the way. There's an extra process involved with using a custom font on a web page that's not a Google font, but that's kind of neat if you like the Squid Game Korean TV show. So yeah, so with fonts, you really just need to look at them and say, well, what do I want to use? Do I want to use something that seems kind of contemporary? Do I want to use something that looks kind of traditional? Or do you want to use something that's way out and maybe a little bit more, fantastical kind of thing? So no right or wrong. You just want to pick a font, a look that goes along with your theme, with, the kind of impression you're trying to make. Now with my font, I'm going pretty boring here. There it is, just good old Verdana. It's a pretty standard thing. You're not going to see me get too crazy with fonts in class just because I'm usually just trying to pick a font and put it on there. But yeah, that's something I'm going to do. Now I'm going to create some more styles on my page. Header. I was watching TV last night. My wife and I are big fans of Jeopardy, the game show. And there's a commercial that comes on during Jeopardy. I don't even know the product, and I can't even remember what, I have no idea what they're selling. But whenever I look at commercials, I like to see the patterns. I like to see the colors they use and the way they arrange content in the commercial, because it gives me ideas for web page layouts. And I was looking at this commercial, and they kind of divided up the screen. They just had a big square, kind of like in the top left corner, but it was a really big square. It was taking up most of the TV screen. And I really dug that. And then they had some text or whatever they were selling off to the side. So it was just a visual layout. Magazine layouts, by the way, are good too, if anybody still reads magazines. Advertisements in magazines and graphics, and stuff can give you some really interesting ideas for web page layouts. So the thing is, I want to do this little box trick that they were doing on their website The challenge is we don't know how big the browser is that somebody visiting our website is using. We don't know if they're on a phone. We don't know if they're on a tablet. We don't know if they're on a widescreen, a 15-inch display on a notebook. We don't know if they're using their TV set. So I want to create this box in the top left corner of my page that fits well under different devices. I'm going to do that with the header, I think, even though it might be better somewhere else. So for the header of this page, I'm going to give it a border right that is 12 pixels solid, and then I'll use RGB. What am I going to do? I'll do 200, 200, 40. It's going to be a kind of a goldish yellow color. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm going to do border bottom, 12 pixels, solid, RGB, 200, 200, 40. So the header is going to be given this border right and border bottom. I'm not worried about the top and the left. In fact, I don't even want to see the top and the left. And by doing that, it's going to create this little bracket, this little border here. You see that? It's pretty small at the moment, but I'm going to change its sizing very, very soon. So I'm just giving it border on the right and border on the bottom. So I'm using these CSS properties to control exactly what I want. And of course, you can see that, all right, well, this border is going to be 12 pixels thick. It's going to be a solid border as opposed to dotted or dashed. And of course, now we're getting used to this RGB as a color value. So basically, equal portions of red and green you can use to make shades of yellow. And since I'm throwing in just a little bit of blue in there, actually my red and green are not the full red and green. Remember, full color is 255. So I've dialed back the red and the green a little bit, and then I've thrown in a little bit of blue to kind of soften it. For instance, instead of 40, if I did 0 and 0, this would appear a little bit brighter when I refresh. Actually, you may not have noticed it because I think it just didn't stand out as much to us. So you might have to trust me on that one, because 40 out of 255 is really not too much, but it just kind of changes the tone a little bit of the color. Oh, here's one way I could show you. I'll put one of them at 0 and the other one at 40, and then we can see. And I think everything is written properly. So let me zoom in. And boy, it's really tough. It's hard to tell the difference between those two. I think I've got them all written properly. Let me change this up to like 90. Okay, you're going to have to trust me on this one. There is a difference. Now, I know there's a difference, not just because I can see the difference, but it's really faint right where my red arrow is along the right. There is a slight change in the shades of yellow, and it's in a diagonal pattern. It'll really stand out to you if I do something like this. Oops, not 1,000. I can't do 1,000. Come on. I'm using this crazy keyboard here in my office. It still doesn't stand out very much to you, but just trust me, it is a slightly different color there. So I'm going to put this back to 40. I'll put this one on 40 so they're the same colors. And I'll zoom out to normal. Okay, so I've got this weird box on there. However, I'm going to set the width of this box very precisely. Now, you've seen me do some numbers. You know, obviously, if I did something like 400px, you would understand exactly what that means. It would be exactly 400 pixels wide. Okay, and you probably might even be prepared for something like this, 80%. Now it's 80% wide. So basically, I can choose different units of measurement for the width of this header. I can have it be a certain number of pixels wide. I can have it be a certain percentage wide. Percentage is pretty neat because then if my browser is narrow, like on a phone, then the header is also going to be narrow. It's always going to be 80% of its parent. So that's a pretty neat way to go. But the other thing I can do is instead of using something like 80%, I could do something like 70 VWs. So you know what a percent is, you know what a PX is for pixel. What's a VW? Any guesses on a VW? It's the size of a standard Volkswagen Jetta. Anybody heard of there's also VH, by the way. It's okay if you haven't heard of these, or even you've probably, when you're browsing around the web looking at code for the participation, they're probably on there somewhere, kind of rare, but VW stands for viewport width. So viewport is a term you're going to be hearing a little bit more, right? Meta name equals viewport. The V in VW stands for viewport. The W stands for width. So basically, now this yellow bordered box is 70% of my viewport width. The viewport width is basically the browser window. It looks very similar, by the way. 70% or 70 VWs is very similar to 70%. The only difference is the percent tacks on some extra space off to the side, which allocates for a scroll bar. VW is really just that viewport width without the scroll bar. So they're very similar, but they are a little bit different. I'm going to go back to 70 VWs. And I just want to encourage you to try something new there as you're experimenting. So 70 VWs. And then I'm going to set the height to be 25 VHs, 25 viewport heights, which is going to make this take up a nice chunk of space there. Cool, I like it. Now for my headline 1, I'm going to do a text align center. I like how that looks. And I'm going to set my font size to be 8 VWs. Whoa, that's too big. 3 VWs. I'm going to dial it back a little bit. 2 VWs. Now, you can actually use this is probably not the best way to go, but I wanted to show you how this can affect things. You can use a font size using a relative sizing like this VW. What's kind of neat about this is my font size is going to be based off of the viewport width, which means if my browser is big, the text is going to be big. If the browser is small, the text is going to be small. So basically, you're making the font size change based on the user's device. Now, of course, if they were really on a phone, I don't think I'd want my headline to be that tiny, and there's ways to deal with that I'll show you later. But I just wanted to kind of point out that this is a trick you can use in order to make things relative size compared to the device the person is using. This really comes in handy, by the way, with images. So with images, we can make them, let's say, 100 VWs. So the image is always the size of the device, or 50 VWs. So the image is always half the size of the device. But I'm pretty happy with that for now. So I feel okay about that. Okay. Now, all of this started because I want to style the span text differently than the headline 1 text. So I'm going to create another CSS rule, H1 space span. And let me do a comment here, by the way. And I want you to notice that my comment is a little bit different than what you've seen before. This is not an HTML comment. This is a CSS comment. Okay. Got all kinds of little devices over to me. I got my other monitor, got my tablet over here, and phone is plugged in, and things are chirping and creaking and cracking. All right. I want the span that's within the H1 to look differently than the H1. Let's see. What if I did something like color? Ooh, this is where RGBA could come in kind of handy. I'll do color, RGBA, and then I'll do, I'm going to do something close to white. So 220, 220, 220, but then I'm going to put in this fourth value to make it somewhat transparent. So in fact, I'm going to put a 1 right there for now, just so we can see what it is. Completely solid. Solid, by the way, is opaque. Opaque is solid. So basically clear versus opaque. Okay, well, that doesn't look any different. The words on web pages looks just like text and hyperlinks. But if I take this 1, this fourth value of my RGBA color, and I change it to like 0.5, now that white is going to be see-through, partially see-through, which makes the white look a little bit more blue because I can see the blue coming through underneath. I'm actually pretty good with that. I'm pretty happy with how that looks, but I'm going to go a step further. I'm going to take this span text and I'm going to display it as a block. Now, this little change right here is going to tell the browser that this span text should be on a line by itself. So now, when I look at my web page and refresh, on web pages is beneath text and hyperlinks, even though when I wrote it, it was all on the same line. So I'm using the CSS, I'm using the styling to tell the browser to display the content in a different way than what it naturally wants to be displayed. And I'm also going to do this. Text shadow. How do I want to do this? How about 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 2 pixels, and I'm going to do a hashtag here. Now, let's be consistent. RGB, I'll do 200, 240. That shade of yellow again. And this is going to give me, oh, you know what? It's my semi-transparent text. It doesn't look quite as cool. It just looks fuzzy. If my font was solid, you still wouldn't notice it so much. Let me do this. 2 pixels, 2 pixels. There we go. You'd start to see a little bit of shadow under there. And in fact, if this was a really dark color, so now it's almost black, then that yellow shadow would start to work. Okay, I'm going to keep it this way. I'm going to make my font a little bit bigger. 3 VWs. Yeah, I like that for now. Okay, so let's just kind of get a recap here of what I did. Absorb this. Obviously, if you're watching the recording, this would be a good stop to pause and type up. So within these 3 CSS rules, I'm styling the header on my page. I'm styling the headline 1, but I'm also styling the span that's within the headline 1. Now, the headline 1 has text align center and font size 3 VWs. You're probably starting to feel pretty solid about that. And then, of course, the span is doing something a little bit weirder. The color of the text is a solid, really dark gray. It's solid because I've got that 1 there for the RGBA value, alpha value. Display block is making the span behave like what's called a block element. So it's putting it on its own line. And of course, text shadow is doing what you would think. It's applying a shadow to the text. The only thing that's probably confusing about the text shadow is what do all these numbers represent? Of course, the last one is easy to figure out. That's the color of the shadow. So if I had 240/40, then my shadow is going to appear red in color. And there it is. So now I've got to, actually, I kind of like that reddish shadow. That looks pretty cool to me. I'm gonna go with the red now. Okay, so with text shadow, the first number is going to be the shadow to the right of the text, and the second number is the shadow below the text. So by starting off with two numbers here, 2 pixels and 2 pixels, that means my shadow is to the right and bottom, down and to the right. If I had -2 pixels and -2 pixels, where would my shadow be? If 2 and 2 is to the right and down, Marcus has it, left and top. So by putting in these negative values here, my shadow is going to be 2 pixels to the left and then 2 pixels above. And there we go. I don't really care for that as much. And of course, you can mix and match. So if I did something like this, that would be 2 to the left and 2 down. So this would be down left. Actually, that looks kind of cool. Yeah, I'm going to go with that one. I like that down left. And of course, you could put it down right, down. You could put it completely to the right. And of course, one of these values could be a 0. So you could have it just to the left or just to the right or just above or just down. You can kind of control it pretty well there. And of course, the numbers don't have to match either, by the way. You could do something a little bit bigger on one of them, and you could kind of see how that looks. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit too much. Yep, I think I really like that 2 and 2. Okay, so those are the first 2 numbers. The third number I've got going on here is the blurriness of the shadow. The smaller this is, the denser the shadow. So if this was a 0, my shadow is going to be solid. It's not going to have any blurriness to it at all. You're not going to notice it too much, but it's a really sharp shadow. But if I change this to like something like 20 pixels, it's going to be very blurry. So the shadow is very, very soft, very hazy. And of course, I can dial this in. Maybe 6 pixels of blurriness. All right, that looks okay. And I can just keep making that number smaller or bigger depending on what I want to go for. I'll try 3. And I kind of like that, but I really like those small, sharp shadows apparently. It's all personal preference. You can do whatever you like on yours. All right, I'm feeling pretty good about that. And of course, the color. So text shadow, pretty neat. I'm not 100% satisfied with this. You see, I've got these spaces here right at the top and over here on the far left. I would really like this header to be pushed up into the corner so that it's really tight with the top of my web page and the left of my web page. So I'm going to tweak it a little bit. I'm going to go back to the header up here. So this is the style that controls my header. And I'm going to do, what am I going to do? I'm going to try this one. I'll do a margin top -8 pixels and margin left -5 pixels. So you can use negative margins. And negative margins, if you had margin, it would create space. Negative margin takes away space. Sometimes it doesn't work, but I think it's going to work in this situation. Okay, so obviously to the left, I need a little bit bigger number. Maybe 8 would work. And I'm just refreshing. That looks pretty good there. And I really need a bigger number for the top. So margin top, maybe that needs to be like 20 pixels. Oh boy, the number has to be really big. Does it need to be 40 pixels? Yeah, 40 looks like it worked. And then of course I could find out, well, could I have done 36 pixels? Yep, 36 looks like it's working. I'm just looking at the top edge to see where that border sits. What about 32? Nope, 32 doesn't quite work. So I would just start to pick a number. Now what I'm doing here is a little bit tedious, and I'll go back to like 36. Okay, there's actually a much faster, more efficient way to deal with that, but I'm not going to show you today. That's something we'll do in week 3. But I did want to point out, this is a good opportunity to show that you can use, again, we can use negative values in order to achieve some look. We can put negative values for our text shadows, and of course we can use negative values for margin. You can't use negative values for padding, but obviously it works with margin. All right, I'm feeling pretty good about that. Now, the only thing I really don't like, I don't like my text is pushed up kind of high, right up here. It's in that box, so I'm just going to change it a little bit. I'm going to go to my heading 1, and I'm going to put padding top 5 VHs. I'm going to test this out. Not bad. Actually, I kind of guessed pretty good, but I'm going to try 3 VHs. And I think I'm okay with that. The only issue is if this was a short browser, the text would start to overlap the border, but I might be okay with that for now. So I'm not too worried about it. And obviously our goal today is not to make super good mobile web pages, but I do want to start to get you used to the fact that things you might do that you're satisfied with on a desktop may not be what you want on a mobile device. But I think I'm okay for that for now. But the key is I'm using padding in order to help push that space down, push that text down. Cool. Everyone doing okay? I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you here. Okay, good. So yeah, it's crazy, right? Because we've been working on this web page for, I don't know, a good 40, 45 minutes. And what do we have on the web page? We have a header and we have a headline 1. That's it. Our page has a title. And, but I have to say that this may be the best looking page we've made so far. In week 1, they were looking pretty rough. And now we're in week 2, where in fact we're in the middle of week 2. And we're gaining a better understanding that we really do have a lot of control. We can use different kinds of ways to create color. We can use different things to create fonts. We can use borders with different colors as visual elements. And we have pretty good control over the size of the text. And with all of these techniques, we can start to make web pages that look pretty darn nice. In fact, the Star Wars logo up here, I'm not that impressed with, to be honest with you. I'm looking at it and there's a little bit of blurriness to it, which I don't think looks very good. And part of that problem is because they're using a image there. They're not using actual scalable text. So I think that's a problem. If I were to right click on this logo, I can open the link in a new, no, I don't want to do that. Oh, I can't get the image. Okay, so if I wanted to get that Star Wars image there, you don't have to do this part, but Control-Shift-I, and then I could inspect, click on that logo, and I'm looking down here, I can see that they've got this, right click, open in new tab. How do I do that? Open in new tab, there it is. So there's the Star Wars logo, and it is a ping image. Now, ping is a great format. However, when you resize a ping image, either bigger or smaller, it can affect the quality of the image. And that's why it can appear blurry. So if the people over at StarWars.com were really on their game, they'd probably create an SVG for this, a scalable vector graphic. And then, of course, you can see the white lettering just barely on the Star Wars logo. The gray that you see here is actually transparent. Ping images can do transparency, so the gray is transparent. So you could actually stick this right on there. Don't do what I'm about to do, but for instance, I could grab this web address and then I could go to my code. And then right here, I could do something like And if I go back to my page and refresh, I got the Star Wars logo right on there. And it actually looks pretty good. I think it looks better on my page than it looks on their page. Yeah. Now, part of the reason I think it looks better on my page is because I've got the image there at its natural size. I think on the Star Wars website, I think they're reducing the size. That's not its natural size. It's smaller than it wants to be. And I think because of that, it looks, and it could be the background too, it looks a little bit more pixelated, just not as crisp, not as sharp. Whereas on my page, I think it looks pretty sharp. That's because it's at its natural size. I think it looks good on that blue background. So now I'm actually doing, let's see, what am I doing? I'm doing two things that I don't want you to do that are bad habits, okay? So one thing that I'm using is I'm clearly using a copyrighted image. There you go, Amanda's got it. Not only is it copyrighted, but I can even see the little TM, the little trademark symbol they've got on there. So it is not cool just to go grab a copyrighted content or trademarked logo and put on your website. So that is problem number one. And different companies are more strict about this than others. Disney is notoriously very strict. They have a team of people that look through the web looking for misuse of Disney logos and characters and things like that. Many years ago, I had a former wife who created a blog that was that kind of made fun of, it was a satire blog about the MTV show The Real World. And I don't even know if that show is still on anymore. And this was like the first season decades ago. And she got a cease and desist letter from MTV, which I thought was cool. You know, I like it when, you know, big companies track you down and, oh, you got to stop you, because she was taking screen grabs from the TV show and put them onto the website to make fun of and stuff like that. And so this is the kind of thing that would get you a cease and desist letter from a company, especially a big company. I can't remember who owns Star Wars. Obviously, there's a parent company, of course. In fact, Disney may own Star Wars, which is double, right? Because Disney's really tough on that stuff, and I think Disney owns Star Wars. So definitely the first mistake I'm showing you here is using copyrighted image. The other thing I'm doing is called hot linking. So in order to display this image very quickly onto my web page for you, I used a complete web address that grabs the image right from the Star Wars website, from disney.io. So that's not a smart thing to do, because if Disney changes the location of this image, it's going to break the image. Here's the other reason hot linking is bad. It's because whenever somebody visits my web page, the Star Wars logo is going to load up. It's going to display. However, it's going to use data. It's going to cause a hit on the Disney server. So basically, the Disney web server is going to get a hit of traffic, even though they don't get the benefit of that traffic. So it's not a good thing to do. There are actually techniques a website owner can do to prevent hot linking. And I used to show people how to do this in the advanced web class, but for some reason I haven't done that in the past few years. I don't know why. It's one of those topics that used to be on there and then it went away. But basically, you can code certain things in order, not here in HTML, but you can code it in a way so that if somebody tries to hot link your image, it will show another image in its place. And so you can really mess with people by displaying images they didn't expect to see. So the only reason I did this is I did want to show you a quick way to put an image on there. Now, here's something I could do. Ooh, do we want to do this? It's better if we do images. I'm going to delete that for a moment. In fact, I'll delete all of this. And now when I go back, logo's gone. Okay. One of your classmates in a different class reminded me of a website, which I hadn't been to in a long time, 500px.com. It's a photographer's website. And there's probably a couple, in web dev, there's always a couple of photographers, maybe not professional, but serious amateur photographers or soon to be professional photographers in class. So they're probably aware of this website, 500px.com. I need to get back into it and study. It's a site I used to visit a lot, but Haven't in several years. And I was looking at it yesterday, and I really like this curve that they have on the website. And the curve is kind of neat. You could do this with me if you're so inclined. So if you're game, go to your browser, open up a new tab, and go to 500px.com. If you don't want to do this with me, that's okay. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be grabbing this curve, this wave. I'm going to save it to my local computer, and then I'm going to use it in my web page. It's not tough to do, but it's a little bit weird. Okay, so if you're following along with me, I'm over at 500px.com, and I want to get this wave. Here's the way I'm going to do it. On my browser, I'm going to press Control-Shift-I to open up this inspection panel off to the right. And I think this works in most browsers. It works in Edge, works in Chrome, pretty sure it works in Firefox. And I'm going to look for this little button up here to inspect an element. It's pretty tiny, but it's a little arrow on a square. I'm going to click it once, and that allows me to hover over various elements. We'll probably do something like this again in week 4 when we do stuff with images. But now I'm going to try to hover around a little bit. I'm trying to hover around, I think right about here. I'm trying to get this top part covered up because I want to see, I'm not clicking my mouse. I'm just moving my mouse around, and I want to get this area right about there. I think this is going to work. And I'm going to click once with my mouse. Okay. Now that I've done that, over to the right, it's showing me the HTML. That's fine. We don't care about that. But I'm looking at the bottom, and it's showing me the CSS. And there's this hyperlink down here that refers to an SVG. I'm going to right-click on that hyperlink, and I'm going to open in a new tab, and I get what looks like a blank page. Oh, here's something I can do for you, by the way. I can grab this address, copy it, and I can stick it in our chat. Actually, that's not, yeah, that may still work for you. Okay. It's a weird looking path that I put in there. Now, this is not a real web page. It's an SVG image. I'm going to right click on this and choose page source, or I could press Control U and I could view the source code. So this weird code with all the numbers, this is that wave image. All right. I'm going to grab all of this, what looks like HTML. It kind of is like HTML. I'm going to grab it, Control C to copy. So I'm copying the code that makes that wave image. And by the way, I'm going to be publishing mine. So obviously, if you don't get it this way, you can get it from my site too. I'm going to head back over here. I'm going to open up a new file. Here we go, new blank file, Control V as in Victor to paste, Alt Z word wrap, there it is. Okay, now I'm going to file, save as. Now I'm going to save this into my images folder because it is an image, and I'm going to give it a special name. I'm going to call it coolwave.svg. All right, so I gave it a file name, coolwave.svg. Now, I'm not going to be publishing my page, by the way, during class on camera, because there's a little extra credit challenge that's out there that involves you publishing using a little bit more of your own effort. So I'm going to hold off on doing that. But there's plenty of videos out there that show me publishing. But I promise you, I will be publishing this page, including my Cool Wave SVG. But still, it's still very confusing. I've got this special file called SVG. It's not a web page. It doesn't seem like an image, but it is. It is really an image. And I want to take this image and I want to put it onto my page. Let me close those settings. So let's see. I'm going to do this right here. I'm just going to do image, source equals, images slash coolwave.svg. default equals empty set of quotes, class equals cool wave. All right, that's what I'm going to do. So I have this image saved in my images folder, which is in my working folder. In fact, can we see it here? Oh, there it is right there. There's my cool wave SVG. It's within my images folder. All the web page, all the files that I'm using related to my web pages are all together in that same working folder. Here's the file I'm making today, text and hyperlinks, and I've got an image in there and stuff like that. So there it is. So I've saved this image to my computer. I did it in a very weird way, but I saved the image to my computer, and now I'm using it on my web page. Let's see how it looks. Where's my browser? That's right. I got to get used to looking at that logo. I don't need that anymore. I don't need that anymore. I don't need this anymore. I don't need that. I do need this. Refresh. Ooh, interesting. Well, there's the wave. Okay. I want this wave to be at the bottom of my web page and to fill up the width. So this part, you have to kind of follow along. So if you did this part here, that's awesome. If you want to do any image, you could stick any image on there you want. Doesn't matter, or just catch this later. Now I'm going to head up here. I called this image, by the way, I did class equals cool wave. So what I'm going to write in my styles is this, dot cool wave. Here, let me do a comment. Cool wave. So I'm styling the cool wave image. My image has class equals cool wave. So in my styling, I write dot cool wave. If you haven't gathered, I made that name up. Cool wave is my own invention there. And now let's see. By default, the image just shows up there, but I want to put the image at the bottom of the web page. So I'm going to position, what am I going to do? I'm going to do position fixed. And I'm going to put it 0 pixels from the bottom, 0 pixels from the left. Now, I'm telling the browser that I want to fix it into place, and I want it to be 0 pixels from the bottom of the page, and I want it to be 0 pixels from the left of the page. Now, by doing this, it's going to put it right down there at the bottom. That's exactly what I wanted it to do. However, I want it to be all the way across. So what do you think? How can I get this wave to stretch all the way across the browser window? Any guesses on what I might write to do that? Even if you're not doing this with me, the goal is I want that white curvy wave, 100% of something. You got it, Amanda. So think about what we did here. I changed the width of this header, right? Well, that's really what I want to do with that wave. I want to change the width of the wave. So if an element is not as wide as you want it to be, then change it. So I'm going to set the width to be 100%. And that will stretch it across. Now, something I like about this especially is this wave is an SVG image. It's a scalable vector graphic, which means when you resize it, it still keeps its sharpness. It still keeps its clarity. That's the problem with that Star Wars logo. The Star Wars logo is a bitmapped image. It's a raster image. It does not keep its quality when you resize it. So the folks over at Star Wars need to redo the logo as an SVG so that way it resizes, it scales in quality. All right, I like this. Now this is of course what they're doing over at the 500 Pix website, but I like that a lot. I like that splash of color on there. Now here's the other great thing about SVGs, by the way, is that you can go to that SVG code, and even though I don't understand most of this, I do understand some of it. For instance, I understand width. We changed it, by the way, but we could have changed it here. Do you see an option on here for me to change the color of this wave? Can you see a place where I can change the color? What do you think? Marcus has it, the fill. Even if you don't know that fill is basically the fill color, this hex code here should have sent some little alarm. Hey, that looks like a color code. Yeah, that's the color code for white. So if I change this to FFC and then save it, I've changed the color from white to pale yellow, which means if I go back here and refresh, that wave is now a pale yellow color. What if I changed it over to 855, or I'm sorry, 855. There we go. That's what I meant to do. Now it's going to be this darkish burgundy red color. And of course, if I changed it to that color I used the other day, 585, that shade of green that I kind of like, now I've got that green wave at the bottom. So it's really easy to change it. An SVG image is written using code, which means a big SVG image and a small SVG image might have the exact same file size. It's very good for creating scalable graphics, hence scalable vector graphics. And if I knew how to do this, you could change these numbers too to change the shape. However, that's probably more trouble than it's worth. So what you would do is you would use a software program in order to create the original scalable vector graphic. And then of course, you could change a couple little things quickly just with a code, like the size and the color. Okay, I like that. I like it a lot. Ooh, I should probably use that same shade of yellow. The only problem is, I bet I could probably do an RGB in there. That probably would work, right? Let's try this out. I've never done this. So if I go up here and I grab the RGB for that yellow, I'm going to grab that, and then I'm going to head over to my SVG code, and I'm going to paste it right in there, and let's see what we get. Refresh. Ooh, that's what I like to call neat. Okay. So apparently we can use the RGB color code in there too, which means we could probably also use RGBA in there as well. So now my border color matches my little wavy. Cool. Yeah, I'm glad you like that, Amanda. There are different things you can do. I already closed that 500 pics website. There it is. So there are certain elements, obviously, we just can't grab from the website. It would be inappropriate, definitely, for me to grab the photo of this woman wearing the jacket who's got no hands, because that's definitely a photographer's work that is copyrighted. This wave is not copyrightable, okay? It would probably be in poor interest for us to grab it and then tell people we created it ourselves, but you can't copyright passages of code on a web page. Companies have tried and they've failed. So you can copyright text. We shouldn't copy somebody else's words. We shouldn't copy somebody else's photos and images. We shouldn't copy someone else's logos and things like that. However, if you like how they've done this button of white text on a black background with the curvy corners, you can copy that. If you like this, the way they formatted this word new with the white text and the green background and the curvy corners, you can copy that. If you like how they arrange the photos here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but they're staggered, we can copy that. In fact, this would be a good challenge in a future class. Can we mimic this layout? I bet we could. So you can't copy some things on web pages, but you can copy other things. And by the way, there's that yellow wave right there. You could grab that in the same way that we grabbed this white wave. In fact, I did this yesterday to test it out, and it works perfectly. So yeah, pretty neat. So there we go. So now I've got a cool wave on my web page. I'm really digging this web page. However, I don't like the fact that I've got this curvy wave and I've got a sharp corner here, or maybe I'm okay with that. Nah, I guess I'm okay. I was going to make a curvy corner here, but we'll do that later on. Let's get, how's our time? 12:45, 1:45. Okay, we're doing pretty good on time. And there's still a couple things I want to show you. And that, of course, is with some text and hyperlinks on web pages. So I'm going to head back over to my HTML, move down to the body section of my page. And by the way, it doesn't matter where that image is, by the way. I can push it all the way down. It's fine. Okay. Paragraph. This is going to be a section where I type a lot of text. You do not have to type everything I type. I'm going to type kind of a longish paragraph. So okay, so I typed a couple of bigger paragraphs. You do not need to type this. I'm not expecting you to type this. You can always grab this later from my webpage. And I did this because I wanted to have a significant amount of text on my page to demonstrate some styling techniques. And in fact, I will put a hyperlink beneath this. Visit 500px for photos and design ideas. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to have this. This is going to be a hyperlink soon, and I'm going to style this like a button, and that will be what we do today. So my whole web page about text and hyperlinks has a couple of paragraphs and is going to end up with a whopping one hyperlink on it. But that's okay, because we're going to do some pretty dramatic stuff to this. Now, I've put some text on my page, and my first thing is I'm curious, how does it look by default? So if I refresh, okay, well, there's the text on my page, and I'm not bothered by it. It looks perfectly fine to me. I think, though, I would like it to at least fit somewhat with my design. So I want to make sure that my text doesn't really spill out off to the right. So I'm going to control the width of my paragraphs. So I'm going to head up to my styling, and I'm going to style all of my paragraphs so that they have a width of 70 VWs. That's the number I used earlier, right? I think it is. Yep, the header is 70 VWs. Now, just doing that is going to make sure that my paragraphs are a little bit narrower. All right, I feel good about that. Now, the other thing I want to change is line height. I think I did this the other day, but let's do it again. Line height, I'm going to do 1.5. That tends to be a pretty good one. Now, a line height of 1.5 will separate the lines a little bit, and line height is an important thing for readability. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about that. Now, I am breaking a couple of rules, or at least a significant single rule of readability. I use some pretty long sentences, probably not very good readable language. So a couple of you may be aware of the website I'm going to show you from another class, but I'm going to copy my text here, and I'm going to look for the Hemingway editor, which is a pretty neat website, hemingwayapp.com. And I'm going to take this text and paste it. So the text I'm using on my website, actually, it turns out to be a little bit better than what I thought. This is a pretty neat little web app for helping you write shorter sentences with simpler language. And it's highlighting and telling me, so I'm using some adverbs, aim for one or fewer. Using text on a web page is Yeah, so I said incredibly important. Is that really better than important? I could probably omit that word. So is an important part of web design. Of course, the word development is misspelled, so I'll correct it there. Style the text in good, meaningful ways. And remember, hyperlinks are, do I really need the word really there? No, I don't, are text. Now the green is I'm using passive voice. I always did this in papers in college. I guess I understand what passive voice is after 30 years of apparently guilty of it, but I still do it a lot. And style them so that they can be distinguished from regular text. And so instead of they can be, style hyperlinks so that they are distinguished. What if I click on this? Will it tell me what to do? Who are our writing experts in class? So that they distinguishable? Is that? I guess that's better. It's not passive voice anymore. So that they are distinguishable from regular text. Okay, so I've used this service. It tells me that I'm writing at a grade 5 level. That sounds pretty good to me. I'm going to take my new text, copy it, head back to my code. Oops, I'm going to have 2 paragraphs here, aren't I? Let me do it this way. I'll get 1. Back to my code. Paste. Get the other paragraph. Back to the code. And paste. If you're creating a business website, this is even more important. You really don't want to write at a complicated level. In fact, you might even consider a grade 5 level to be your max. If you can write at a 3rd or 4th grade level, all the better. And explain your products, use short sentences and stuff like that. This is called Hemingway because Ernest Hemingway is known for writing very short, simple sentences in his books, his stories. There we go. So I have a slightly better, more well-written paragraphs. And if I refresh, okay, I'm pretty happy with that. I might make my font size a little bit bigger too. So I'm going to style these fonts for my paragraphs to be bigger. I think that works. It doesn't work. Why did I think that worked? What does work? 600? And I'm trying different things that aren't working. So I guess I'll just have to do the old 110%. Give it 110% of your effort, make your fonts 110% bigger. Okay, well that works. All right, so I'm happy with that. Now I want to work on this hyperlink in here. So this hyperlink is going to be special. So I'm going to put an opening anchor tag with a hyper reference. And then I need a target. No, I don't need a target. Do I? Nope, I'm not going to use target this time. And I want the closing anchor tag to be all the way over here. So basically, when somebody clicks on the words, visit 500px for photos and design ideas, I want to go to that website. So I need to know the exact web address. So I'm going to find it again. I keep getting rid of it. Yep, leave. Copy, paste. There we go. Okay, I'm going to make one little modification to this. I like putting a trailing slash on the hyper references whenever you link over to a new folder or new website. If you don't have the slash there, nothing terrible happens, but it creates 2 successive hits on the web server. You would never know this as a visitor. It's just if you have a web server, then you would start to get that data. And most sites will have that trailing slash on there. I'm kind of surprised they did not. So we're actually going to help them out by putting a slash on that hyperlink. Okay, so this is a functioning hyperlink right now. If I go back to my website and I refresh, there's my hyperlink. I'm going to click it. And I go to the 500px website, 500 pixels website. Cool. However, I want this hyperlink to not look like that hyperlink. I want it to look like a big yellow rectangular button. So I need to style this anchor tag in a special way. And I'm going to do that in the opening anchor tag. I'm going to call it class equals cool button. I want this hyperlink to look like a cool button. I'm going to use techniques we've already been practicing in this class to style to enhance this button. Cool button. All right, so I head up here to my styling. Cool button. Notice I put a little dot in front of that. Dot cool button corresponds to class equals cool button. And then I just have to put in a bunch of stuff that I really want about this. So I could do something like background color. I'm gonna use that same shade of yellow. So that way I have a consistent look. Right there. Copy that. And paste. And then the color of my text, I'll make that really dark gray. Font size is going to be 120%. Padding is going to be, what is it going to be? It's going to be 16 pixels top and bottom, 24 pixels left and right. So you can also put comments right next to lines in your CSS. You can do it with HTML as well. So this way we can put a comment right next to that little piece of information we wanted to remember what it means. So this means 16 pixels of padding top and bottom, 24 pixels left and right. Let's see how this button is looking. Yeah, it's looking pretty good, I think. Yeah, I can dig that. Let's enhance it even more. Display inline block. I'm not going to tell you what that means yet because it's kind of contradictory. Actually, I kind of could tell you what it means because we did display block up here. So we did display block for the span. That's not very descriptive though. I plan on hitting you over the head with this a little bit more in week 3. So I know that's a bad explanation, and but we're going to get plenty of this very, very soon. So I definitely want to do that, but I do want to do this. This is an important one. You're going to have a quiz. You're going to have at least 2 or 3 quiz questions on this over several quizzes, probably starting in week 3, going into weeks 4 and 5 and stuff like that. This comes up a lot. This is a technique for centering a block on the page. So let me test it. I'm going to come back and make sure we're clear on what's going on here. Okay, that's not what I was hoping for. So I'll tell you this. I'm going to take this and make it, I'm going to do that display block. And that's still not what I want, but I'm closer. Let me do this. It'll make sense. I'll do a width of 40 VWs. Refresh. All right, feeling a little bit better about that. It's still kind of big. How about 30 VWs? Better, better, better. Okay, I'm digging this. All right, I can handle this. So display block makes it, I'm going to say, this will allow me to clarify this, makes it behave like a block. Now, by the way, a block element would be like paragraph, headline. Paragraphs and headlines are block elements. So by putting this in, I'm making my anchor tag, my hyperlink, I'm making it behave like a block element. Of course, margin, 24 pixels top and bottom, auto left and right. This is how you center a block element on a web page. Now, since my hyperlink is now a block element, I can center it like it's a block element. We're going to do this multiple times, okay? I know it's hard to kind of take in all this stuff that I'm typing here today, but I promise you, you're going to do this over and over again. Now, of course, width is pretty self-explanatory. The width is about 30% of browser window. And of course, that is doing that. That looks pretty good, but let me do a couple more things while I'm here. Text decoration none. Remove underline. And border radius 8 pixels makes curvy corners. Oh yeah, it looks good. One more thing. Good old text align center. Centers text within the block. Okay. This is a lot of stuff on here, but this would also be another good spot to pause when you're watching the video again and kind of seeing everything that's going on. We've got comments almost everywhere, except for some of the stuff that's very self-explanatory. That's a good habit. Maybe we should all be doing this more, especially me, putting more comments in. So border radius gives me little curvy corners. Text decoration none gets rid of the underline. By default, hyperlinks are underlined. But you can get rid of that underlining so that, oh, okay. Now this is all still a hyperlink, by the way. I can click on this and it's still going to take me to the 500 pixels website. Looks pretty good. And but now it's a little more button-like. And of course, this is extremely popular on websites. In fact, here's one right here, sign up. That's a hyperlink that looks like a button. They've done something a little bit different, but pretty similar. I could go to Zipcar's website, and we got a hyperlink right there that looks like a button. Join, it's a hyperlink that looks like a button. Head over to Uber. There's a hyperlink that looks like a button. There's one down there in the lower right. There's one up there in the upper right. So basically, these buttons are pretty important on websites. So important, they have a name. They're called calls to action. It's a call to action. Pretty much every web page needs to have at least one call to action. And it's how a website would measure success. At Uber, they want me to sign up to drive, or they want me to sign up. Over at Zipcar, they want me to join now. Over at 500 pixels, they want me to sign up. That's how they're going to measure success for this website, having a call to action. You don't have too many calls to action, but you always want to have at least one, maybe two, to measure if you're achieving your goals for your website. Most websites do that, practically all. Obviously, some websites might just be informational, so they would measure success in some other way. But I'm pretty happy with how that button is looking. I'm going to jazz it up just a little bit, and then we will all go our separate ways. But I'm going to put a little bit of a box shadow on here. Yeah, so I'm probably showing you maybe a wee bit more than I may have. You know, this is a lot of week 3 material here too, but this is just going to let us get into more week 3 stuff. I am a big fan of repetition, so all the stuff we're doing here at the end of week 2, I would definitely like to redo on week 3. If you're jumping ahead a little bit, you've got some ideas, you're seeing stuff, yeah, put it into action. I'm not going to hold you to it if you don't do it, of course, so don't worry if you didn't. If you feel like your first web pages are looking kind of boring, that is okay. The most important thing to me in week 2 is that you're writing your HTML really nice and clean, and you're closing things, you're spelling things properly. The head section is well written with all the important stuff in there. Once we get into week 3, then I'm going to start to expect more style and color and stuff like that. So if you're doing style and color now, great. But don't feel like if you don't do it, it's going to be a bad grade. So I'm going to put a little bit of box shadow Actually, I should probably use the same box shadow that I used up here. Oh, that's a text shadow though. Well, check this out. I can grab the text shadow, put it down here, but instead of text shadow, I'll do box shadow, but it's all the same color and the same location. And so now I'm going to have that red shadow down there for that yellow text. I like that. Yeah, looks pretty neat to me. Okay. All right, I'm going to do one thing. This is way above and beyond week 2 stuff here, though. What am I going to do? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do A:\active. And then I'm going to do transform, translate. I want it to go down. That's going to be translate Y, 2 pixels. Is that what I want? We're going to find out. And I'm going to say box shadow, 1 pixel, no, -1 pixel, 1 pixel, 1 pixel, and I want this to be darker. RGB 240, 40. Now, if I want that same shade of red, but I want it to be darker, then I want these numbers to get closer to 0. So basically, if I made the 200 into 180, and then I dropped the 40 to 20, and I dropped the other 40 to 20, it's a very similar shade, but it's a darker red. I'll explain why I'm doing this in just a moment. All right, I think that's what I want. Let me test it and see if it worked. It did work, okay. However, it's not very exciting, so let me dial this down to, I'll dial this one down to 0. Okay, that's gonna work. Okay, so what I did here is super small and super subtle, and I'll come back and put some comments in. But basically now, when somebody clicks on this button, a couple things are going to happen. The button is going to move downward just a little bit, 2 pixels. It gives the impression of that button being pressed by seeing it move. Oops, I clicked and let go. Okay, so it gives that impression that the button is being clicked. The other thing I'm doing is I'm making the shadow smaller and darker. When an object, now, if we were in a face-to-face class, I could show you this with the projector. I could put my hand up there and I could show you when an object is far from the surface, the shadow tends to be fuzzier and lighter. But when an object gets close to the surface, the shadow gets smaller and it gets darker. So by pushing this button down, the shadow gets smaller and a little bit darker. You can't really tell that well, but that's the effect that we're going for here. And so it's just a visual effect. And of course, it's still a hyperlink. What I'm doing by that, I'm clicking and holding my mouse button and then moving the mouse away so that I don't activate the hyperlink. But if somebody were to click on it, it goes really fast. I click it, I see the button go down. When I let go, it takes me to the other website. So it's a design technique, basically. And you're just trying to think of natural elements. Here's something else I did that I didn't call attention to. Obviously, I used the same shadow on the text that I used on the button. I did that intentionally. When you're using shadow effects on elements, you don't want to change the shadows. Light comes from a source, and the source of the light can't be different for different objects on the same page. There's no rules that really say that, but it's just kind of a design idea. So if I do a shadow that's in the lower left or on the text, all other shadows that I use should also be on the lower left. Because if I do a shadow somewhere else, like the lower right, I'll exaggerate it here. Oops, that's not the way to do it. I do it up here. Let's say that was a 3. Okay, so now my button has a shadow that's dramatically different than the text. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Is the light source in the upper right pointing downward, or is it in the upper left pointing downward? It can't be in both places to create those effects. So it seems very subtle. And if you did this on a web page, I probably wouldn't even mention it to you, at least not in weeks 2 and 3. I might mention it to you in week 9, but it's just something small to kind of keep in mind. I'm going to put this box shadow back to, I think it was -2. There we go. So now there's a little bit more consistency in that use of shadows. So we have a pretty simple web page, but I hope you enjoyed it. And Amanda says it's interesting. I bet others think the same way. And again, go simple. It's okay to do small, simple web pages, which is, I think you can all agree, that's what we have here, right? We have a pretty small, simple web page, but it's got some pretty neat elements on here that you might start to incorporate a little bit more. And in fact, I know for a fact, I'm going to take some things that I did today and start to put them into my web page. Very soon, you're going to be working on assignment 2. I know some people already have. I think Marcus has already started on his assignment 2. But basically, come on. When you or someone goes to your personal web page for the class, they're going to be presented with some information, some text, and some hyperlinks. Well, I want to start to jazz mine up too. I kind of like the page I did today. I like the colors and some of the look more than my week 1 version. That's perfectly normal. You're going to learn a lot of new things and you're going to change how pages look. And you'll be amazed. By the way, this Uber webpage, we did this as an assignment a term or 2 ago in 195, and it's not that tough. We can make a web page that looks just like this quite easily. In fact, they even have this cool effect here. When I hover over this text, you see how that black line slides across? That part is not so easy, but it's definitely doable, okay? So we can even do that kind of stuff there. And that little hover background where that little gray bubble, yeah, we definitely do that. So all of this is going to be within your realm of ability, I promise you. So if you think your pages are simple now, yeah, they are. They're simple, but they're going to get cooler and better and nicer as the weeks wear on. So I think we're going to go ahead and stop there. I'm going to turn off the recorder. I'm going to stop sharing, and I am going to do some cleanup on my web page, but I don't think I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to make some hyperlinks, but I think I'm going to wait and do that later on. I've got some plans with my significant other, my spouse. And so I'm just going to do a couple things here, and I want to get the recording set up. But just so we're all on the same page, don't forget, on the home page of Canvas, I have, of course, a link to where my site is. So you can always go there to click that to get my page. And then I'm steadily building in the hyperlinks to the class recordings. So notice there's a hyperlink on there for some style and publish. I did this Monday evening after class on Monday. And there's going to be another hyperlink right there pretty soon with today's class recording. So that's going to get bigger and bigger as we go through stuff. And of course, under modules, there is a participation activity right here for week 2, HTML tag scavenger hunt. 5 students have already done this, or at least before class started, maybe 1 or 2 have done it since. So please take care of that. There's another quiz to take later on this weekend. And then there, of course, there's going to be an assignment where you're actually making your homepage, your first official homepage. So it's a read through this one. It's a pretty critical assignment. And I'll just bring up the directions real quick. And it's going to be tougher than the first homework assignment. There's going to be a little bit more involved with what we're doing, making an index page and creating another web page called About, making another web page called Hobby, and then publishing them all, making hyperlinks to them. It can seem pretty overwhelming. So yeah, so definitely you could be working on this now, by the way, to get some practice in there. We can do it. So thank you very much for hanging out with me today. That's what we're working on in the short term. And I will be around on Thursday and Friday. I've got some kind of Zoom meeting on Friday morning from like 8:30 to 11:30, but I'll be around. I'll have Zoom. Ooh, that's true. I'm in Zoom. You won't be able to connect with me that way, but I'll have my email open off to the side. So on Friday, if you need to get in touch with me, email's a good way to go. Any questions or concerns about what you're working on for the next couple days? Excellent. Cool. How do you do the icon so quick? Can I just type a little emoticon? Oh, I see. I have to click that little button over there. There we go. Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recorder. It's going to process for a while, and then I will update hyperlinks and things like that and all that fun stuff. So talk to you later. Thanks. Thank you, Marcus. Thanks for your support too on doing some of that fancier stuff. It gives me ideas to talk about in class. Thanks, Wes.